You're listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast with Jody Livingston, episode number 24. The brothers, they think I don't know a buttload of crap about the gospel, but I do.
Welcome to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast, helping you survive and thrive in youth ministry. And now your host, Jody Livingston.
Well, hey, everybody. Welcome to the show today. Thanks for listening and tuning in. Wherever you are, wherever this finds you, thanks for making this podcast today a part of your day. If it's your first time listening, welcome to the show. Thanks for coming over and checking it out. Fantastic episode today. Man, super excited about today's episode. One of the best, if not the best, episode that we have done thus far. So you're in for a real treat. And if you're coming back, well, thanks as always for coming on back. If you're enjoying the podcast, man, please head over to iTunes and Stitcher, subscribe there, write and leave a review. Helps the podcast a ton in the rankings, helps other youth pastors and youth workers find the podcast, and is honestly just super duper encouraging to me. A bunch of you guys doing that already, and I appreciate it so very much. You can follow me on Twitter at Jody Livingston, that's Jody, and of course catch me over on the Facebook at The Longer Haul. All the links and resources today mentioned in this episode, you can find over at the show notes at thelongerhaul.com/episode 024. That's thelongerhaul.com/episode 024. Also, just to let you know, at the end of the episode, man, the guest today is Jeremy Lee, by the way, from parentministry.net. He has a monster freebie for listeners, so you're going to want to stick around for the end to catch that at the very end there. Super cool freebie, very, very awesome, and a great resource for you in regards to your parents, which is the topic that we're talking about today, is how do we help parents and equip parents and encourage parents to leave a legacy of faith. And regardless of where you are in your ministry, how old you are, how long you've been in ministry, your context, some helpful practical stuff for you today. We specifically tackle how do you do this when you are young and don't have kids or aren't a parent yourself, but certainly relevant for everyone in there. Some really good practical stuff. We also talk about his upcoming book, which I'm super excited for, and some pretty neat stuff coming around the corner with that. So you're going to want to for sure head over and check out the show notes and take some notes of your own. Grab the freebie at the end. Again, just a fantastic interview today with Jeremy. I just appreciate him so much, and his heart for parents, parent ministry, families, and equipping that. And really, the heart of all that, the root of all that is his desire just to see God really show up and work in the lives of students and teens. So great interview today. Before we jump into that, I want to thank today's sponsor, which is audible.com. I've been talking about this for quite some time now. Great resource for you. And for listeners of the Longer Haul, they're offering a free month and free download, which is pretty awesome considering that we're youth pastors and we like free stuff, right? So you can choose from any of the 250,000 books they have there. And several of you guys lately have been telling me about some of the books that you're getting and listening. And so please keep doing that. Let me know. Shoot me a message on Twitter or shoot me an email. Just let me know what you're reading and how you're enjoying that for sure. And you can grab that free month and free download by going to thelongerhaul.com/audible trial. That's thelongerhaul.com/audible trial. So super cool resources. Again, great episode today. I'm super excited for you to hear it and listen to it today. And so with all of that said, we'll jump in here to today's interview with Jeremy Lee from parentministry.net. Well, hey, Jeremy, thanks for coming on the show today, man. I really appreciate you taking your time to do so, and I'm really excited about our topic today. I think it's really, really important one for not just youth pastors, but for the church as a whole. And youth pastors, I think, serve a really unique role in being able to help parents when it comes to equipping them to leave a legacy of faith. And I think every parent feels the responsibility to do that, the pressure to do that, and just may not know what steps to take or feel like culturally maybe we're at a place where they can't do that. So I'm really excited to tackle this, and I know the listeners are certainly going to benefit from that. I know you're a youth ministry veteran from way back. You obviously have a heart for parenting and families, huge heart for youth pastors and youth workers. You're a speaker. You're an author now, which is big.
That's right.
So beyond that, how about take just a few minutes, introduce yourself to those listening who may not know you, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, first of all, Jody, thanks so much for having me, brother. This is awesome. Congrats on your podcast. This is really fun to be a part of it. I've heard nothing but good stuff about it. And, you know, what's exciting for me is that your whole theme, the longer haul, it really is not a foreign concept to marry that right next to parent ministry, because just to be honest, when you start to make the shift to take care of parents as well as students, you do position yourself for the longer haul, in my opinion. So, but my name's Jeremy, and you're right. For 20 years, I served in churches. I actually worked at summer camps and even in some schools. But so my ministry career took a lot of different directions. But at this point, I always get my years wrong, so I'm chronologically not correct on this. But somewhere around 7, 8, 9 years ago, I really started just to have a shift in my passion, in the same way a lot of your listeners probably have at some point, where you kind of keep hearing at conferences or reading in books or seeing it on blogs or whatever, seeing people talk about this importance of harnessing the spiritual influence of parents, that parents are the greatest spiritual influence in the life of a teenager. You hear that enough, you start to think, man, this kind of has to be a little bit more than pizza parties for me. I've got to start changing my methods. And for me, that kind of happened when I had a conversation with a mentor one day, and he just kind of was in full on challenge mode, which is what a good mentor does. And he just basically said, "Hey, listen," and he leaned in before he said it. See, that's when you know they're serious.
That's dangerous.
And he asked me to list for him my top 5, my 5 students that have graduated from my ministry, and just would be my best examples of some kids who just got it, who understood the faith, accepted the faith, and was living out the faith. And so, you know, and Jody, you do that real quick. I mean, just start making, while I'm talking, make your little Hall of Fame and see if we match on this. Okay.
All right.
So I was putting together my list of names, and I said, it wasn't too hard for me to come up with at least the top 2 or 3, and maybe to round out the bottom 5. I might have had a challenge, but then he had a follow-up question, and the follow-up question was this. He said, how many of those receive spiritual support from home? Which means their parents shared their faith and encouraged their faith at the very least. And it was, for me, it was all 5. And it wasn't just my top 5. It was probably my top 30, my top 40. For sure. And by the way, there are awesome examples of amazing teenagers who have zero spiritual support from home, and they just get it and get after it. Of course that can happen. But if you play the percentages, and if you look at the majorities, and you really start to try to take a larger, broader view of your ministry over the long haul, you'll start to see that the highest percentage of teenagers that graduate from your youth ministry and get it are the ones that are receiving spiritual support from home. Okay, so if that is true, and I believed it to be true, then that changes everything. And that is exactly where I ended up, and that's ultimately the genesis point of parentministry.net. And there's more to the story for sure, but that's kind of where I started, and that's kind of how I got into this journey. I immediately went back, and like a mad scientist in the laboratory, I started to decide I'm going to implement, and not just implement, but prioritize parent ministry in my youth ministry. And I'm telling you, it changed everything. So, and that has led me here with you today, Jody.
No, you're right.
I'm very thankful for it.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, I jot down the names here, or just thinking beyond the names. And in almost every case, you're right. There was a strong family, strong parents behind that. And we've talked a little bit about this, I think, but so I started my youth ministry career, if you will. I became a youth pastor at 18. And, I had no clue what I was doing. But because I was so young, I was kind of forced into a role in a place where I kind of had to partner with parents. I mean, to be totally honest, just if for no other reason, I couldn't drive a rental van, and I couldn't rent a car.
Yeah.
So I had to have parents as a part of my ministry, really from the get-go. And I think that really helped me see the value of that early on, although not necessarily, I don't think there's no way I understood the spiritual significance of what that would mean for us. But then as I transitioned, that first church, I was making stuff up. Nobody died. That was good. And I didn't get fired, although, I probably should have a few times. And when we transitioned into our second church, we came in with the mindset of we've got to know and have parents on our team. And so we did a few things, I think, right out of the gate there, and we're really intentional to involve parents there. And that's continued even to where we are now. I mean, I'd say out of all of our youth workers, 95 to 98% of them are parents of teens and students in our youth ministry. And that's been very intentional on our part. We have a parent leadership team that I meet with a few times a year that really serve as an advisory board to us and kind of help guide and steer the ministry. A ton of our decisions that we make with parents and families in mind. We're doing a parents retreat every year in the spring to kind of help equip and challenge and encourage those folks. And that's made all the difference in my ministry. And that really, you're right. When you say there off the beginning, like, that really has allowed me to be able to stay put. I've earned the right and the trust with those folks, and they've seen the benefit of the ministry in their family. We're not doing everything that I want to yet, and certainly not everything that we could, but it certainly has been a big focus for us, and I think it's just such an important topic that is often neglected. And I think, let me ask you this: do you think a lot of youth pastors? I remember so early on in my ministry, back in a long time ago, we'll leave it at that. I remember going to a large youth ministry conference, and from the stage, hearing not in so many words, but basically that parents were kind of in the way, right? They were kind of the enemy. If they would get out of the way, then we could do our thing. And I think that really has permeated even today in some sense, some youth pastors, like seeing and viewing the parent as kind of well, gosh, if they would just do their job right, it would make mine easier. Do you think that's still present today?
Well, definitely back when you and I were starting, that was probably unspoken. I guess maybe when we got into our circles at ministry conferences and parents weren't listening, we might have found the courage to say it out loud that that parents were probably something to be put up with rather than to partner with. But and that's kind of that was kind of the mentality, because just to be honest, because parents really didn't offer much back. I'm a 90s youth minister, and we were taught a certain way of doing youth ministry, and I think it has changed dramatically, just to be honest, especially in the past few decades, for the better.
Yeah.
But one of the things about a 90s youth minister is we were positioned as the center of the universe of our ministries. We were, in essence, to quote the Pied Piper. We were head pastors were hiring dynamic personalities to come in and kind of charm teenagers with amazingly entertaining events. And so, and again, there are elements to that are still present today, and also there are elements to that aren't wrong. But from a parent ministry perspective, a dynamic central leader like that basically begins that relationship with, what can you do to help me pull this awesome ministry off? And so what is happening is, we've come from putting up with parents, basically seeing them kind of as a source of complaints and frustrations, to now we've made this shift to where we are partnering with parents. We're basically saying, okay, I'm going to swallow my pride a little bit, and I'm going to move from being a rock star, which is I'm the center of this ministry. It kind of rallies around my personality. And I'm going to shift to being a tour guide, where I'm going to recognize that the largest percentage of spiritual activity should be happening in the home rather than the church. And the largest amount of spiritual influence should be happening with you as the parent rather than me as the rock star minister. So I'm going to step back and I'm going to act as a spiritual matchmaker between the parent and the teenager. And I'm going to create settings where I can bring them together spiritually, set up a beautiful experience like a tour guide, and then do what a tour guide does. You step back and you just watch the experience happen with a smile on your face. And you're really over in the corner, leaning off to the side, looking at what has come from the environment that you set up. That is partnering with parents. That's setting up parents to succeed. But now I believe we need to make the next step, which would be, because we throw that term around. I know it's semantics, but it's still important. We throw that term around, partnering with parents. And all that means is I recognize I can't do this by myself anymore. I can't throw enough pizza parties to make a large long-term impact in the lives of these teenagers. I have to speak into and partner with the greatest spiritual influence, and that is their parents. But one of the mistakes, or not mistakes, but I think the next advancement of that is for age-graded ministers to find the freedom to not just partner with parents, but also to invest in parents, just the same way we invest in the teenagers, to see them as someone that has a need or someone that has a hurt. I mean, because that's ultimately what ministry is at its core. I'll never forget when I was taught that definition, that ministry is a find a hurt and heal it, find a need and meet it through the power of Jesus Christ. And therefore that earns the right to share the gospel and to represent the gospel to someone's heart. That is ministry. That's the heart of ministry. So if we're talking about parent ministry, we're not just talking about mining them for their spiritual influence and then now utilizing it to carry out our mission. We're talking about seeing them as folks who have real needs and real hurts and taking time to invest in them. That's the message. That's the bell that I'm ringing with every age-graded children, preschool children, and youth minister that I'm around. And just to be quite honest, they're still got the calf at the new gate look when I talk about that. And here's why, because they're so dang busy. Yeah. They just are. Their resources are tapped. They are spending so much time, effort, and energy. We were just talking about your summer, man, and how exhausted you are because you're going from thing to thing to thing. And that there's two reasons for that. Your personal expectations of your ministry and your personal goals in leadership, but then also the goals of your head pastors or whoever you report to. They've got goals too of the larger scope of the church that says, hey, listen, we need you to take care of we want, when families come to your church, we want those families to leave, and the teenagers are nagging the parents in the car going, hey, that Jody guy was awesome. I want to come back to that church, because they know if they can get that to happen, family's most likely going to come back because the parents will adjust. And if the teenagers and the kids are happy, cool, we'll go there. Right. So that's just to be honest, one of the reasons why children in youth ministry have had the growth spurt that they've had over the last few decades. And again, I'm not bashing that. I'm not saying that's wrong. But just to be honest, the only way we're going to start switching from partnering to investing is when the age-graded ministers themselves see value in it and they begin to speak to their superiors and say, you know what? I want to be able to invest financially and with some of my time in the actual parents themselves. So I don't know. I think it's a worthy goal, and it's worth our time, because ministry is not just partnering, it's also investing.
No, I totally agree with that. Okay, let me ask you this question, because I know some listening are likely thinking this. Let's say you're a young youth pastor. You're not married, no kids, just kind of starting out. How in the world do you tell a parent, hey, I want to equip you and invest in you and be taken seriously for parents? You know what I mean? Because, So I tell people there were really 4 events in my life that changed my ministry forever. One was getting married. The second was having kids. That was a huge, huge moment for me. Turning 30 was a huge. I think that I was looking forward to turning 30 because I was tired of being called like that kid, right?
Yeah.
And
sure.
so for some reason, when I hit 30, like a switch flipped, and now all of a sudden I was seen as an adult. And you know, those moments, all of those, all 3 of those, directly related to how parents viewed me as a youth pastor. And those were huge hurdles to overcome. So what would you say to a really young youth pastor who's trying to invest in parents?
Well, I would talk to him about perception, because and that's really what was going on with you. Nothing happened. Nothing really changed when you went from 29 to 30. When you went to bed as 29 and you woke up as 30, nothing really changed for you. But what did change was the people's perception. So when a parent would ask, "So how old are you, Jody?" and you said 30, they'd be like, "Okay, he can take care of my kids. He's not a young punk." If you would have said 29, they would have had a raised eyebrow and said, "Yeah, I don't know, maybe not. He's in his 20s, so who knows? He might still be crazy. Is he actually responsible?" Because ultimately, this is what a parent is thinking at all times: are you responsible enough to take care of my kid? Even when they're teenagers, are you able to have fun with them, but at the same time keep them safe and make responsible decisions as if you were me?
Yeah.
And here's one of the things that happened to me when I had kids. I ended up literally every night because I was at a really large church, and I would take hundreds of kids to an event. And anytime we went to an overnight event, Jody, this is just vulnerability here a little bit. I would lay in the fetal position the first night, because now that I had kids and I understood what it was like to let someone have my kids and me not be there, the amount of trust it took to do that now hundreds of parents have done that, and they've given that trust ultimately to me. And then to realize there is no human, it's not humanly possible for me to protect all hundreds of those kids the way I would want my child protected. That was that was a high pressure. That was a high pressure. And so perception is so important. And this is what I would say if I were right in front of a young minister, having coffee with them, chatting about this. This is what I would say. I would say, first of all, this is what I say: you don't have to be an expert. You don't.
Yes.
Yeah. We all think that in order to address parents, we have to have a PhD and we have to have raised 7 teenagers ourselves for them to ever take us seriously. And that's more of a partnering mentality. But when you take an investing mentality and you just simply pour into them, you'll find that they would rather have an encourager than an expert. And if you just see the parents as not an obstacle to move past or a source of complaints to address and to navigate, if you see them as a person who by the way, is parenting through a stage that is not easy, that usually leaves them feeling very insecure, very discouraged, and a lot of the times extremely frustrated. And if you can just really start to see them for who they really are, you'll see the same thing that attracts you to ministering to teenagers. You'll have that same push inside to invest and to attack the hurt and the pains and the frustrations of those parents. And when you do that, perception changes. I might look at you like a young punk who doesn't have kids and doesn't know what you're talking about, but when you sit and you care enough about me to ask me, and when you come to me and say, "Hey, I've been praying for you. Is there anything? I mean, you matter to me, and you're right. I don't know anything about this, but I care about you. Is there one thing that you could tell me that I could pray for you about?" And to notice people, to care about people, way better than being an expert. So, and there's no requirements for that. One of my favorite ministers right now, I'm thinking of him in my head. I'll just say his name, Justin Herman. I mean, a lot of folks may know him. He's pretty active online. he's married with a baby now, but for a long time, when he was just newly married, no baby, he was all over parent ministry, and the parents love him for it just because he paid attention to them. He cared about them. And if you look at Justin, he's all tatted up. He's he talks like the guy from The Godfather with some kind of weird Italian accent. And, just to be honest, if I'm looking at him and I'm a parent, I'm like, dude, no way am I letting this guy have my kid. But he attacked that with just sheer attention and care and love. And his parents the parents in his ministry were just going goo-goo over it. So I would say that. And then secondly, I would say that perception has a lot to do with your attention to the details of safety.
Yes.
We really ignore this so much. The preschool ministers don't. They know that they're out of business if they don't pay attention to that quickly. But when they become teenagers, we as youth ministers start to get really, really lazy in that area. And you win so many points with a parent when you start your camp meeting by saying this: hey guys, we're riding in a bus to camp. I want to talk to you for a second about who's going to be driving your kids. These are licensed and bonded drivers. Here is what I did to make sure that these people were trained and that the buses were maintained. And then also, I want to talk to you about the lodging. I went there myself to the cabin, and I was looking for a lot of things, but one of the things I was making sure was, are there a lot of hidden angles where people can hide and do crazy things, Or is it an open environment where, everybody kind of can watch each other and it's a little bit more safe? And I just want to let you know it's an open environment. And so what that means is I have a lot of confidence in our lodging area. Hey, by the way, just to let you guys know, we are bringing a camp medical person where they are a camp nurse and they're going to take the medicine. And I just want you to know I'm not giving them any other task but to watch over the medicine and to be available to anybody who is hurt. And by the way, I'm also at camp, I'm bringing what I'm calling the security guard, because sometimes teenagers are teenagers and they run around at night when they're not supposed to. And I don't want that, and I know you don't want that. So what I'm going to do is I'm bringing a guy or a girl who is going to stay up all night. They'll sleep during the day, and they'll stay up at night. And by the way, I'm bringing somebody who's not a jerk that's going to yell at your kids and make their experience horrible. But I am going to bring somebody who's real attentive to safety, because that matters to me, it matters to them, and I know it matters to you. And I can keep going. There are 1,000 different things you can bring out. And when you start to speak that way and you start to care for their kids in the same way they do, talk about the longer haul. I just want to see somebody try to fire a minister who pays attention to that.
Yeah, it's really hard.
Yeah, because the parents will go, because they know if you get fired, somebody's going to follow up that's a knucklehead, because they've seen the knucklehead youth ministers, and they're like, no, this guy or this girl, they pay attention to my kids' well-being physically and spiritually. They care, and I'm not going to let go of that. So final thing I would tell you about this is that you are an expert at something. Even if you don't have a kid, and even if you're not married, you're an expert at something. And that is, you spend as more time around teenagers than the average parent does. You just do. You're around all kinds of teenagers, all kinds of families, all kinds of situations. So I would appeal to your perspective. Now, I wouldn't throw it in their face, but I would just simply say, hey, I've never parented a teenager. That is so true. But what I see is that it's hard, because when I spend my time with teenagers and I know their culture, I know how they talk, I know what they're watching, I know what they're listening to, I know what they're struggling with. And by the way, I'm listening to them when they're not with you, so I hear some stuff that they're probably not going to tell you. And so parents, I have a lot to offer from that perspective, and I would like to be a resource to you.
Yeah. I used to laugh and I've said this before, like, I was an expert at marriage until I got married, and I was an expert at parenting until I became one.
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes that's so good. Like, you don't have to be the expert. Don't try to be, because for a long time, I was bivocational, and I was a teen director at a pretty large nonprofit, and I ran, as part of that responsibility, was running a lot of camps and after-school programs. And as you know, we would intentionally train our staff. Look, there are 2 times your parents are going to see our camps and our after schools, and they're going to make their entire judgment about whether they're going to send their kids here again the next day based on those. And that's drop off and pick up. You can screw up the whole day in between. But if you don't do well when they're dropping off, if their parents don't feel their kid is safe when they're dropping off and things don't look organized and you don't have your act together, or when they're picking up, you've lost it. You've lost it. And I think the same is true for us in student ministry. And it doesn't really take a lot of effort. It just takes some planning and some forethought on that. And, we never take students someplace that we don't go ahead and see, even like our mission trips. I'll go down ahead of time or go wherever we are. Generally speaking, I'm there seeing it, looking at it, meeting with folks that we're going to work with, talk with folks, and that I can come back and answer questions that parents have, and I'm not just making stuff up. That goes a long way. And I think, too, as a young youth pastor, you have an opportunity to use that to your advantage, your youth to your advantage, and say, you're right, I'm not a parent, or I'm not a parent of a teen, and that's why I need you in my ministry, right? We need each other here, and I want to encourage and pray for and equip and help you in every way I can, but I need you to be a part of our ministry. And I think at the end of the day, I had somebody tell me when I was really young, like, hey, listen, the calling that God's placed on your life to serve these kids, to serve these families, to serve this church, that is a calling that God has given you, and He will equip you to carry out that task. And nobody can change that. You don't have to be the expert. God didn't put you here because you knew everything. He put you here because you're usable and teachable. And I think if for a young youth pastor, you got to remember that, like your ability to carry out your ministry to those parents and families is not found in being a parent. Because I know a lot of youth pastors who are parents of teenagers who are lousy youth pastors. So just love on folks. That's so good, man. Thanks for that.
And here's another, you talk about the drop off. When I started to really focus on parents, who I started to take some cues from was the school system. Because they are way more accountable to parents than we are. Let's be honest. I mean, they have to deal with the parents. If a teacher in a school messes up, the parents are all over you. So they have to really think about and make great impressions with parents. Okay, at my kid's school, when I drop off, guess where the principal is? He is right there on the sidewalk, opening the car door, calling my kids by their first name. Good morning, Campbell. Good morning, Hudson. Yeah. And where is he during drop-off? He is sitting right there with his little walkie-talkie, probably talking about the football game with the security guard, but he looks like he's saying really important things. And so he recognizes the perception of the drop-off and the pickup. Where are 97% of youth ministers during drop-off and pickup? Where are they? They're at the sound booth, making sure their slides for their talk are set up correctly. Or they're out there messing around with the teenagers, which is an awesome thing. But I would say this, in your weekly programming, you're about to spend all the time in the world with the teenagers. Yep. You could take the 15 minutes before and the 15 minutes after and get out there and be with the parents. Yeah. Of course, you want to delegate, volunteers, interns, associates, whoever, to be in there with the kids while you're out there, but drop off and pick up. That was so smart that you said that, Jody, because that is so real. And I'll also never forget when a parent came up to me, Michael Stender. I remember this like yesterday because his sons were extremely involved in the baseball program. And he was one of my few original key leaders in the parent ministry that I was putting together, key volunteers. And he came up to me and said, Jeremy, he goes, I don't understand this. As I've been thinking about parent ministry, he said, I'm a part of my son's baseball team. And to play baseball in high school, I get a letter of requirements. Like, I have to pay a little over $1,000 in all kinds of equipment and fees and all this stuff. He said, I have to work in the concession stand. I'm required to sell car wash tickets. I mean, I have all these requirements. He goes, when a kid comes to be a part of your program, you don't ask them to do anything.
Wow.
And he said, that doesn't make sense to me. How come? Because baseball is way less important than my kid's faith. So why? Why is that? And that just started to get at me. I certainly wasn't going to go ask for $1,000 and
well, you could
and require parents to do stuff, but it also it speaks to the partnering element. To be able to say to a parent, hey, in order for your kid to be a part of this awesome program, he's going to get all of this, but I just need this one or two things from you.
Yeah, that's good.
The school system really hasn't figured out the way they. And here's another thing, Jody, that I think if a minister did this, maybe if they're in a really large setting, they might have to leverage volunteers for this. But I'm going to tell you something, and I've been thinking about that. I'm going to put out some content on this soon. But schools do parent-teacher conferences.
Mm-hmm.
Think about if we utilize that strategy in our ministries. And I'm thinking to myself, dude, this is a no-brainer to have a parent. Sorry. To have a parent. Whew, that I got something in my throat.
Dying, man.
Yeah.
It's because you're so old now.
I'm
been youth ministry since the 90s, man.
I just cough like an old man.
It's all those lock-ins from the 90s. They're killing you.
But to call in some parents and say, hey, I'd like to schedule a meeting with you and discuss your kids' spiritual progress over the year.
Yeah, that's
whoa.
Good.
I mean, whoa. If you're listening to this podcast right now, send me a thank you card and do that. But I'm telling you,
yeah, no, you're right, man. You're right.
And I'm going to speak real directly to the people who have 20, 30, 40, 50 students. You should be doing this yesterday, and it should be you that's doing it. And yes, is it going to take a lot of time? Absolutely. But that goes back to that previous discussion of plan a few less pizza parties and take time to do this, because this, to call in some parents and discuss the spiritual progress of their kid in a more parent-teacher type conference format, where you've got some notes prepared and if you've ever said, and if you don't have kids, talk to a teacher about what they do at a parent-teacher conference and learn, because I'm going to tell you, it's we do 2 a year at my school. It's 2 of my favorite times of the school year. And you better believe, as a parent who cares about my kids' education, I'm coming prepared.
Oh yeah.
And you're going to identify what kind of parents do I have. Do I have a parent who shares faith but is scared to kind of invest in their kids spiritually? They don't really know how, so they kind of avoid it. Do I have a kid who shares faith, or a parent who shares faith, and they are highly motivated? They just need encouragement and the right tools and all of that. Or do I have a parent who doesn't share faith and is hesitant, or doesn't share faith and is happy for you to do it, or whatever? So you can not just diagnose the student, you can start to diagnose the parent and take notes on that. The ability to gather information, the ability to make progress. I mean, what if you did it in a parent-teacher type setting where the mom or dad doesn't share your faith, and you basically say something to the effect of, well, hey, it's such an honor that you allow Billy to come here. Here's what I see going on in Billy spiritually. What do you think about him coming to church? Because you know that they don't come. You see that they don't come. So, and then they have a chance to kind of voice that. Well, we're just happy Billy's got a positive place to hang out and all that, blah, 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 blah. Then you say, well, I just, your Billy is your kid, so I know he matters to you, but I just want to take a few minutes to tell you how much he matters to me. And although I know, you're not as into this, I still would like to tell you what we're teaching, Billy, so you kind of understand it, and you can ask any questions you want. My goodness, what an awesome thing to do.
Yeah. So. Oh, yeah. I love it, man. So we talk about passing this legacy on. Are there some things, and I know you got a book coming out on that for sure, parentministry.net, huge in equipping and helping youth pastors who don't really have those resources or the time or know kind of where to start. Man, it's so good. Are there some just principles you would give, or some steps that you would give, some helps to how do we do that? How do we encourage and equip parents to be able to feel confident in doing this? And I know that's a big question, so maybe the Cliff Notes version for the sake of you. And then people can go read and go buy the book.
Basically, what I just heard is I don't think you want me to talk a lot.
No, I know. I'm just trying to be mindful of your time, man. We'll stay here all day. I love it.
Okay, so what we're talking about is just approaching the parents. Well, step one is for sure identifying what kind of parent we're dealing with, and I just kind of quickly buzz through the three types of parents that you're gonna face or get to not face like they're velociraptors from Jurassic Park or something. The three types of parents that you're going to get to interact with in your ministry, and I'll just go through them real quickly. One of them is they don't share their kids' faith. They're allowing their kids to come to your program, but they don't share their faith. And for them, parent ministry looks like outreach ministry. It's basically, we're going to build a connection with your student and love your student so well that it piques your interest about the gospel. And then we're going to care enough about you to start to talk to you about the parenting pains you're dealing with as a way and a bridge towards the gospel.
Yeah.
And then second, there are the parents who do share faith, but there's an intimidation factor. I mean, here's the thing, and I talk to parents about this all the time. It's easy to invest in your kid academically. It really is. Get them in a really good school. Help them with their homework. Hire a tutor when they're struggling. There's systems in place, concrete systems to follow. And really, just to be honest, every parent in the world has got a similar struggle with that on the academic level. So we have a real clear process developed for that. Athletically, same thing. So many parents are actively involved. If your kid wants to be the next athletic superstar, they have all the opportunity in the world, and it's real easy and spelled out to help them develop athletically. Hire a coach, get them in a good league, get private lessons, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
So, but your kid is made up of mind, academics, body, athletics, but they're also made up of a soul. And that is where things get murky. Things are more abstract. And just to be honest, the vast majority of parents that you're going to start to invest in, they are working out their own faith. And so how in the world could they find the courage to speak to their kids about matters of faith when they're still trying to figure it out themselves? Right. And that's, for me, in the churches that I served, that was the largest group of parents. So I had to find a way to teach and inspire, and both at the same time. And then the final group is those that share faith, and they're highly motivated. They aren't scared. There's not really an intimidation. They just give them the right tools, point them in the right direction. And by the way, those are your leaders. Those are the people. That's how you really attack the second group, is by going to that third group and saying, hey, will you help me come back and inspire and invest in these other folks who basically their biggest struggle to passing down faith to their kids is fear. They're afraid. Can you help me fight that fear? So I think step one is to know what kind of parent you're dealing with, because just to be honest, each one of those parents there's a different approach to each one. And then secondly, and this was a mistake I made early on, and these are adjustments I've had to make, is don't expect too much. And some of this, I might get pushback from some of this, but I'm going to try to explain myself out of that pushback. Because, if I'm listening to that, I'm like, oh, gosh, here we go. We're going to water it down, water it down, water it down. We love to use that phrase, water it down. But this is guess what I'm trying to say. When you have someone who, I'm going to really just kind of talk about that second group, the kind of the scared and intimidated group. When you have someone that is scared and intimidated and doesn't really know where to begin, you don't throw at them a complicated, time-demanding system of how to accomplish a task. Let's put it this way. I'm not a small guy, right? So let's say I want to go and get on an exercise plan and become a little bit smaller. So I go to meet with someone, and that person just slaps a plan in front of me where I am gnawing on tree bark and working out 7 hours a day. I am bolting, right? So, but if he says, hey, come today and let's spend 20 minutes walking on the treadmill and stop eating cake. Okay, I can move forward a little bit with that. I'm not as scared to take a step one. So I think one of the things that we can do for parents is create experiences for them where they can whet their appetite with spiritual leadership, where they can get a quick win in the lives of their kids, and they can really get to see what it feels like to do to lead the way God designed them to lead, which is to lead their kids spiritually and pass down faith. That's his blueprint from the beginning. So that I would say focus on, my best way to describe this, and I've already mentioned it earlier, is think of yourself like a spiritual matchmaker. Find ways where you can set up an experience where parents can lead their kids spiritually, and it's not incredibly scary and intimidating for the parent, but it's powerful and effective for the teenager. That's where the rites of passage experience comes in. That's what the book is about. The book is called Pass It On. And also at parentministry.net, the site that I started, 4 years ago now, we basically have given videos and resources and everything a church needs, and we tell them that they can take our name off of it, put their name on it. Youth ministers love that junk because that means they can get all the credit for it from their senior pastor, and I'm happy about that. As a former, I really don't care if they ever even know about parentministry.net. Put your name and brand all over it. So they have all these resources to give. But basically, we kind of mined that down into a book so that now, we have it online, but also ministers can buy a book. And the book basically is a few chapters that talks about spiritual leadership, kind of defines for parents why that is important, and basically tells them not to be scared of it, but rise to it. It's not anything to be afraid of. And we're going to just start out with these small little steps. One thing that you can do each year to lead your kids spiritually. Let's just start there. And then the rest of the book goes from kindergarten all the way to 12th grade and gives a rite of passage that they can lead their kid to, a spiritual rite of passage they can lead their kid through every year, from kindergarten through 12th grade. It's meant to be a reference book for parents. It's like a what to expect when you're expecting for spiritual growth.
That book. Oh, man.
But so we just got back our first round of endorsements for the book, which was humbling and awesome. And, by the way, when you see a picture of me and you hear me and you're around me, you're going to say, why is this doofus getting a book? Well, let me tell you the key to that. Get somebody who's written like 40 kajillion books and just annoy them long enough till they say yes. And that's what happened to me. Dr. Jim Burns, who, if you don't know who that guy is, you get off this podcast and start Googling him. No offense, Jody, but that dude is awesome.
Oh, yeah.
He's like the Yoda. I mean, we talk about the history of youth ministry with him, and he remembers it because he's been around. He's been around 40 or 50 years, which, just to be honest, is kind of the lifespan of youth ministry. And so he remembers it. And so that he is so full of wisdom. And he's come in and he's just brought his taste to this process. He brought his layer of insight that I would never have. He's raised, I think, 4 teenage daughters. So I hope I didn't just screw up his family. I'm gonna have to Google that and make sure. But he's raised a bunch of daughters. I've met some of them, and they're awesome. So he has some experience that I don't have, and so he brings that to the book, and it's an awesome, in my opinion, it's an awesome book. So these first round of endorsements came of all of Jim's friends, because Jim just basically says, will you endorse my book? And everybody says, yes, So, but this is what they said that meant a lot to me, is about 2 or 3 of them said, this is a book that parents should keep on their lower shelf. That means a lot to me, because I think basically what they're saying is, I think you're going to refer back to this book over and over because it's got that annual rite of passage, and that's the kind of book we wanted to create. It's a great resource for parents, and pretty soon, Jody, I don't know, probably not by the time you put this podcast out, but people can pay attention and sign up for our email list at parentministry.net, and we'll be broadcasting it, trust me, I like to broadcast stuff, so you'll hear. I'm the publisher has given me permission before we launch to be able to give the book away free to ministers. Isn't that awesome?
That's awesome.
Now, I don't want to sound like a used car salesman, so let me be honest about this part. You will have to pay like a shipping and handling fee. What that means is, and this is basically what I'm trying to say, you would pay something like $7 or $8, but here's what that does. That pays for the actual print of the book and the cost of me getting it to you. Basically, I don't want to lose money to get you that book.
Sure.
But I also don't want to make any money. I'm just trying to get it to you because I believe that if I can get it in your hands, you'll order 10 more for the parents in your ministry. And I hope that's the case. Maybe I'm wrong, but we'll see. And I'm willing to, and I basically begged and pleaded my publisher, and they said, "Sure, let's do that." So we're going to do it. No,
I'm so excited for the book. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about it, in the last month or so, and I just think it's such a helpful resource. And look, you talk about quick wins, anytime a youth pastor can give something to parents that is a really tangible, easy resource to help them parent and raise their kids spiritually, that is an easy win for you as a youth pastor. And so I think this is a huge resource, along with everything at parentministry.net. Man, I'm a huge fan of what you're doing and how you're equipping youth pastors and helping parents and encouraging them, and highly, highly encourage everybody to go check that out. Like, it's just so good and so practical, and really, really, really helpful for sure. So I hope everybody will check that out. And you have a podcast that you podcast on occasionally, right?
Absolutely. I have taken a sabbatical from my podcast over the summer, but actually today is my first recording day. We're coming back next Tuesday. And Parent Ministry Podcast. It's for all age graded ministers, and I interview really, really smart people. I started the podcast out of it was purely selfish, man. Just because here's the deal. Really smart, famous family ministry people, they don't want to call and just chat with me. But if I record it and send it out to 4,000 people per episode, then hey, they're going to love talking to me. So that's the only way I can get folks to pay attention. So the podcast was selfish. I love the podcast. It's pretty fun and pretty great. Hey, speaking of free, I want to give something that's actually free to your listeners.
Yeah, that'd be awesome.
You told me I'd have the chance to do that. parentministry.net/passingdownfaith. parentministry.net/passingdownfaith. We have there for your listeners a video series that we filmed, and I absolutely love this video series. It is. I'm pulling it up right now as we speak to make number one, make sure the link works. I should have done that before. Yes, it does. Okay. Session number 1, session number 2, 3. Okay, it's 4 sessions. So when we created this resource, when we filmed it, we worked with a guy named Brian Hausman, who, by the way, is an awesome speaker to bring to your church. He does parent seminars every weekend. He wrote Tech Savvy Parenting, really great guy. But we partnered with him, and he has been working on some content that talks specifically about the actual spiritual relationship between a teenager and their parent. So basically, how do you talk about God type stuff with your teenager? Well, this is a 4-part video series, and we did it basically around 10 minutes per. The first one's 8 minutes. They're all about 8 minutes. They're about 8 minutes. But they're meant to be, if you're in a room with parents, you show this 8-minute video and let it spur some discussion, and then you jump in and finish the discussion. It's a really cool resource. I mean, if I were selling this resource to somebody, I would value it somewhere between $30 and $40, maybe even $50, because of the amount of production value put into it. So, but for me and my house, we're giving it to your listeners for free today. And there's not even a password. Just go to that link, share it with everybody, tell the world. I don't care.
Shout it from the rooftop. That's awesome, dude. Thank you so much for doing that and for coming on, man. I appreciate it. I've got a ton of notes here. From us. Seems like I say that every episode, but I'm a note taker, so maybe that's why. If folks want to connect with you more, obviously parentministry.net, they can check out the podcast. They can be on the lookout for books. Where else can they find you online and connect?
Bigstud.com. I'm just kidding. Don't look that up. I don't even know what happened.
That would probably be bad.
I know. Just as soon as I said that, I was like, Jeremy, that was dumb. Do you edit your podcast? If you should edit that out.
I'm not editing. I'm gonna leave that there, man.
Dadgummit. What a friend. What a friend. Okay. So, of course, on Twitter, @Parent Ministry. On Facebook, it's facebook.com/Parent Ministry, all that stuff. If you just go to parentministry.net, you can find me there. But if you want to email me, which would be awesome, you can email info@parentministry.net, INFO, and that will end up at me eventually.
Sweet. Thanks, man. I appreciate it again. And just thanks for all you do. And I so appreciate your heart for parents and parent ministry and families. And I know, man, every youth pastor can certainly benefit from the stuff you're doing. And I think this episode is super helpful. It has been for me, really encouraging. And man, I'm just grateful. So thank you so much.
Oh, thanks for having me. This was fun.
Cool, man. Well, we'll catch you later. And there you go. Man, just a great interview. Jeremy's such a great guy and really has a huge, huge heart for just parent ministry there. And I think you can hear that. I hope you can hear that in the interview, just his desire to really encourage and equip youth pastors and youth ministries to be more effective at equipping parents. And I think we all recognize the importance of parents and the importance that they play in the lives and the role they play in the lives of their kids. And so just some super duper good stuff. Man, again, go grab that freebie there for you. There'll be a link for that in the show notes at thelongerhaul.com/episode024. So you want to head over there and check that out. Be on the lookout for his book, especially as it comes out, launches here in the next couple months. Just a great, great, great resource. And you can jump on there, man. Take advantage of that offer to get the free plus shipping book. I think it'll be a helpful resource for you, certainly, and definitely one for the parents in your ministry. I just appreciate his willingness to get that into the hands of youth pastors and just his honesty in that. So good. So good. So check out parentministry.net for sure. Check out his podcast, Parent Ministry Podcast as well. And head over to the show notes to grab the link for that freebie there that he's given out and given to you. What a great resource for you on there. So with all that said, that'll wrap us up and do it for today. And so we'll see you in the next episode. And until then, give them Jesus.
Thanks for listening to the Longer Haul Youth Ministry Podcast at www.thelongerhaul.com.